Everyone thinks they know what a millionaire looks like. They imagine expensive watches, luxury cars, huge mansions, someone walking into a room and making everyone look. But what if the richest person in the room was the one nobody noticed? What if the man standing next to you in a grocery store line, the man sitting quietly at a coffee shop, the man driving an old car with a cracked windshield was secretly worth $900 million? The strange thing about silent wealth is this: it doesn't announce itself, it doesn't walk into the room first, it doesn't demand respect. The world teaches people to chase attention, to show every achievement, to prove they are winning. But some people discover something different. The less people know about you, the more freedom you have. His neighbors think he has a normal job. His friends think he earns a comfortable salary. The cashier at his favorite coffee shop thinks he is just another customer who orders the same drink every morning. Nobody knows that while everyone was watching expensive cars pass by, he was quietly buying the roads those cars were driving on. His journey did not begin with million. It started with something much smaller, a question most people never ask. Who owns the things everyone depends on every day? Because while everyone wanted to become famous, he wanted to understand something more important: how money actually moves. At first, nobody believed there was anything special happening because real wealth is usually boring in the beginning. There is no celebration, no crowd, no congratulations, just a person sitting alone, making decisions that seem too small for anyone else to care about. The first investment he made wasn't impressive. Nobody would have posted about it. Nobody would have called him a genius. But he learned something that changed everything. Rich people don't always chase money. They build systems that allow money to find them. And that small decision would become the first brick in an empire nobody saw coming. Years later, the same people who ignored him would see his life completely differently. But by then, it was too late. The first thing he bought was not a mansion. It wasn't a sports car. It wasn't something that made people turn their heads. It was something so ordinary that most people would walk past it without a second thought. A small business, a simple operation, something that solved a problem people had every single day. And that was the moment everything changed, because he discovered a secret most people never understand. Money doesn't come from looking successful. Money comes from owning things that quietly create value. At the beginning, the numbers were small, so small that nobody would have cared. A few $100s here, a few $1,000s there. Most people would have looked at those numbers and said, that's not enough. But he saw something different. He wasn't looking at the money, he was looking at the machine behind the money, because one small stream can become a river if you know how to build it. While his friends were upgrading their lifestyles, he was upgrading his assets. They bought things that lost value. He bought things that produced value. They celebrated every paycheck. He focused on building something that could survive without him. And slowly, something strange started happening. The person everyone thought was ordinary was becoming financially untouchable. Nobody noticed because his success had no audience. There were no social media posts, no interviews, no pictures standing next to expensive cars. He understood something powerful. The moment everyone knows you are winning, everyone starts wanting a piece of the victory. Years passed. The small decisions started multiplying. One business became two, two became five. The income that once felt impossible became normal. But the strangest part wasn't the money. It was that his daily life barely changed. He still woke up early, still wore simple clothes, still drove the same reliable car. Because he didn't become wealthy to impress people. He became wealthy to control his own time. Then came the moment nobody expected. His accountant looked at the numbers and asked a simple question: do you realize what you have built? Because sometimes the person creating the empire is the last person to notice how big it has become. The world was still seeing an ordinary man. But behind the scenes, a financial machine was quietly growing. By the time people started asking what he did for a living, it was already too late, because his biggest achievement wasn't becoming rich, it was becoming rich without anyone watching. Most people imagine a billionaire's life as something loud: private jets, luxury parties, a mansion with a gate so big nobody can see inside. But his life looked completely different. Every morning started the same: a simple breakfast, a normal drive, the same coffee cup, the same quiet routine. The only difference was something nobody could see: Every day, while he was living normally, his assets were working for him. The secret was not that he owned something impressive. The secret was that he owned many small things. A building here, a business there, a piece of land nobody cared about, a company solving boring problems, things that never became viral, things nobody posted online. But every month, they quietly deposited money into his accounts. People often chase what looks exciting, the newest technology, the fastest trend, the business everyone is talking about. But he learned a different lesson. The most valuable things are often the things people stop noticing. People always need places to live. Businesses always need services. Communities always need basic solutions. And those needs don't disappear just because the world changes. But there was another reason he stayed invisible. He discovered that attention has a price. When people believe you have nothing, they treat you normally. They talk honestly. They don't expect anything. They don't see you as an opportunity. And for someone who values freedom, being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage. One evening, someone asked him a simple question. So what do you actually do? He smiled, because that question was harder to answer than people realized. How do you explain owning dozens of income streams? How do you explain years of patience? How do you explain building something nobody saw happening? So he gave the answer everyone expected. I own a few small businesses. Technically, it was true, but it was also the biggest understatement of his life, because behind that simple sentence was a network of investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars, a fortune built quietly, a life designed carefully, a success story that existed without needing anyone's approval. People think having $900 million would change how you live, but the biggest change was not what he bought. It was what he refused to buy. People assume that once you become incredibly wealthy, life becomes easier, but nobody talks about what actually changes. It's not the money, it's the way people see you. The moment people discover you have more than they imagine, some begin to admire you, others begin to envy you, and a few only see what they can get from you. That's why he made one decision years ago. If success ever came, it would stay private. His phone rarely rang with strange requests. No distant relatives suddenly remembered his birthday. No one asked him to invest in impossible business ideas, not because those people didn't exist, but because nobody knew there was anything to ask for. Privacy became something more valuable than another $1 million. It allowed him to keep one thing money can never buy back: peace. His closest friends never cared about his bank account. They cared that he always answered the phone, that he showed up when someone needed help, that he never acted like he was above anyone, because deep down, he understood something many wealthy people forget. Money can change your lifestyle, but it should never change your character. There were moments, standing in line at a grocery store, waiting at the airport, sitting in a doctor's office, when he looked around and realized nobody in the room knew: the elderly man reading a newspaper, the mother comforting her child, the college student scrolling through social media. To them, he was simply another stranger, and somehow he preferred it that way. One afternoon, he met an old classmate. They hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years. After a few minutes of catching up, the classmate laughed and said, "Looks like life treated us about the same." He smiled and simply nodded. There was no need to explain. Some victories are worth keeping to yourself, not because you're hiding, but because they no longer need validation. And that's when he finally understood what true wealth really meant. It wasn't the balance in his accounts. It wasn't the businesses or the investments. Real wealth was waking up every morning with complete control over his time, choosing what to do, choosing who to help, choosing where to go, without asking permission from anyone. The hundreds of millions were simply the result. Freedom was the reward. But there was one day, one ordinary Thursday, when a single email changed everything, not because it made him richer, but because it revealed a number so unbelievable, even he had to read it twice. It happened on a Thursday, not at an awards ceremony, not on a private yacht, not during some life-changing celebration, just another ordinary Thursday. He was picking up supplies for one of his businesses when his phone vibrated, an email from his financial advisor. The subject line was so ordinary, and most people would have ignored it. Quarterly portfolio summary. He opened it without expecting anything unusual. He looked at the screen, then looked again. For a brief moment, he thought there had to be a mistake. His total net worth had officially crossed $900 million. There were no fireworks, no applause. Nobody around him noticed. A father walked past with his daughter. An employee stocked shelves nearby. Life continued exactly as it had 30 seconds earlier. He expected to feel different. He expected excitement, victory, maybe even relief. Instead, he felt something much quieter, gratitude, because the number on the screen wasn't the achievement. The achievement was the person he had become while building it, patient, disciplined, curious, free. Money had given him options, but it hadn't given him happiness. That had come much earlier. It arrived the first time he realized he didn't have to worry about paying next month's bills. It grew stronger every time he could spend an afternoon with family instead of sitting in another meeting, and it became permanent. The day his calendar finally belonged to him. People spend years chasing symbols of success, the bigger house, the newer car, the designer watch. But those things only tell people you have money. They don't tell people you own your time. And if you had to choose between looking wealthy or living freely, which one would actually make you richer? The world may never know his name, his neighbors may never discover the truth, and tomorrow morning he'll probably stand in line for another cup of coffee like everyone else, because the greatest luxury was never the $900 million. It was waking up every single day, knowing he never had to pretend to be someone else. Maybe that's what being rich really means. Not owning the most, but needing the least. So, before you chase the appearance of wealth, ask yourself one question. Are you building a life that impresses strangers, or a life that finally sets you free? If this story changed the way you think about success, then maybe the next investment you make shouldn't be in something that makes you look richer, but in something that makes you live freer. Subscribe for more stories about wealth, psychology, and the hidden habits that quietly change lives.